When the favelas became battlefields, he turned blood into business. Born Luis Fernando da Costa on April 25, 1967, in Duque de Caxias, Rio de Janeiro, Fernandinho grew up where survival meant learning the streets before learning to read. Duque de Caxias, part of the violent Baixada Fluminense region, was a sprawling industrial wasteland where poverty, pollution, and crime intertwined like poisonous roots. His childhood was unremarkable in its misery. Absent father, struggling mother, too many mouths to feed. The favelas of the 1970s and 80s were laboratories of desperation, where the state existed only as an occupying force, where police arrived to punish rather than protect, and where young boys learned that authority was just another gang with better weapons. By 20, Fernandinho had already announced himself as a new player. He and his associates stole heavy weapons from the Brazilian army and sold them to traffickers, a brazen crime that marked him as different. Sentenced to 2 years for robbery, prison became his university. Released at 22, he returned to favela Beira-Mar in Duque de Caxias, the neighborhood that gave him his nickname. He quickly became a local drug trade boss, but understood that the future belonged not to the toughest fighter, but to the best businessman. He learned logistics, supply chains, money laundering. He established connections with Colombian suppliers, corrupt Brazilian officials, Uruguayan money launderers. By his mid-20s, he wasn't just selling drugs in one favela. He was coordinating shipments across state lines, negotiating with international suppliers, building an organization that would span South America. Comando Vermelho, the Red Command, was founded in the 1970s in Rio's Cândido Mendes prison. Born from an unlikely alliance between left-wing political prisoners and common criminals during Brazil's military dictatorship. Political prisoners taught organizational skills and revolutionary rhetoric. Criminals brought street knowledge and violence. From this fusion emerged Brazil's most powerful criminal organization. By the 1990s, Comando Vermelho controlled drug distribution across Rio's favelas, but lacked international connections and sophisticated supply chains. Enter Fernandinho Beira-Mar. In the early 1990s, Fernandinho received a 12-year sentence for drug trafficking, but went into hiding, expanding rather than retreating. He traveled to Colombia, Bolivia, Paraguay, meeting suppliers at the source, establishing routes through the Amazon, creating a logistics network that could move tons of cocaine with remarkable efficiency. In 1996, police caught him in Belo Horizonte with 4 kilograms of cocaine. Sentenced to another 12 years, he ran his operation from prison using smuggled phones and corrupted guards. In 1997, he escaped, likely through bribed guards and forged documents. For 4 years, Fernandinho was one of South America's most wanted fugitives and most successful traffickers. He fled to Uruguay, Paraguay, then Colombia, but wasn't running blindly. He was building, learning, consolidating power. He transformed Comando Vermelho from a territorial gang into an international trafficking organization. Trucks carrying cocaine and legitimate cargo, river barges through the Amazon, clandestine jungle airstrips. He didn't just manage drug routes, he innovated them, constantly adapting to police pressure. Colombian suppliers trusted him. He spoke their language, understood their business, and always delivered. While rivals fought bloody turf wars over street corners, Beira-Mar negotiated contracts worth millions. Fernandinho didn't just supply drugs, he supplied the tools of terror. Automatic weapons, grenades, ammunition flowed through his networks into Comando Vermelho's hands. The 1990s and early 2000s saw extraordinary violence as rival factions, Comando Vermelho, Terceiro Comando, Amigos dos Amigos, fought savage wars while police conducted military-style raids, often killing civilians in crossfire. His name carried weight. Association with him meant access to weapons, drugs, money, protection. But also absolute obedience. Betrayal meant execution, not just for the informant, but their family. The favelas maintain a complicated relationship with traffickers. Where the state has abandoned its responsibilities, criminals fill the void. Comando Vermelho settled disputes, provided emergency loans, paid for funerals, funded community events. This wasn't altruism. It was strategic investment in loyalty. Fernandinho understood this perfectly. He was both monster and benefactor. Children grew up knowing his name, some with fear, others admiration. That income came from selling poison. that purpose meant becoming soldiers in endless wars. But in communities abandoned by the state, monsters and benefactors often look the same. By 2000, Fernandinho was one of Brazil's most wanted criminals. International agencies, Brazilian Federal Police, Colombian authorities, Interpol, DEA, coordinated efforts to find him. But he had unlimited money for bribes, safe houses across multiple countries, and protection from powerful criminal organizations. Intelligence indicated he had fled to Colombian territories controlled by FARC guerrillas, negotiating deals to exchange weapons for cocaine. On April 19, 2001, Colombian military forces raided a remote location near the town of Mitu, capturing Fernandinho and several associates. He denied everything, claiming he was a simple peasant farmer. His lawyers fought extradition for months, but the evidence was overwhelming. Colombia deported him to Brazil in 2002. Fernandinho stood trial for drug trafficking, money laundering, arms trafficking, and criminal conspiracy. The prosecution presented intercepted communications, financial records, witness testimony revealing networks spanning multiple countries and transactions totaling hundreds of millions of dollars. He was convicted and sentenced to decades in prison. Combined with previous convictions, his total sentence exceeded 300 years. Symbolic, as Brazilian law limits actual time to 30 years, but reflecting the magnitude of his crimes. For most criminals, this would be the end. But not for Fernandinho Beira-Mar. Brazilian prisons were overcrowded, violent, corrupt. Despite maximum security classification, money could buy anything: phones, drugs, weapons. For Fernandinho, prison wasn't a cage, it was a different office. Within weeks, he was conducting business as usual, smuggled phones coordinated with outside lieutenants, corrupted guards delivered messages, other inmates, many Comando Vermelho members, followed his orders. From solitary confinement, he organized shipments, ordered executions, settled disputes, planned strategy. In 2002, coordinated prison rebellions erupted across Brazil, strategically timed, clearly centrally planned. Authorities suspected Fernandinho's involvement. The message was clear. Even imprisoned, he commanded an army. Over following years, Fernandinho faced multiple trials. In 2006, sentenced to 120 years for ordering 4 inmate murders. Convictions accumulated: money laundering, trafficking, conspiracy, murder, extortion. Each trial revealed more about his operations: financial accounts under false names, coded communications, lawyers and family as intermediaries. In 2006, Brazil created its federal prison system, maximum security facilities designed for the country's most dangerous criminals. Fernandinho was among the first transferred. Held in solitary confinement under 24-hour surveillance, cells searched multiple times daily, communications strictly monitored. But even in these extreme conditions, his influence persisted. Intelligence reports indicated continued communication with Comando Vermelho leadership, though with greater difficulty. His symbolic importance remained significant, a living legend whose existence inspired loyalty and fear. In 2021, video surfaced showing Fernandinho claiming torture in Campo Grande federal prison. He alleged 6 months of solitary confinement under degrading conditions, psychological abuse. He went on hunger strike. Human rights organizations investigated. Prison authorities denied allegations, arguing security measures were necessary given his continued attempts to direct criminal activities. The incident highlighted fundamental tensions in Brazil's justice system regarding extremely dangerous criminals. As recently as December 2024, Fernandinho remained an investigation target. Operation Tourniquet, targeting cargo theft rings in Rio's Baixada Fluminense, included search warrants in his Catanduvas prison cell. Authorities alleged he was directing truck hijackings and cargo theft from maximum security through sophisticated communication methods and intermediaries. 20 years after capture, police still conduct operations targeting him, testament to his enduring influence and Brazil's ongoing struggle to neutralize such figures. As of 2025, Fernandinho Beira-Mar, now 57, remains in Brazil's federal prison system in Catanduvas, Paraná. He serves a cumulative sentence exceeding 300 years, limited to 30 by law, under the differentiated disciplinary regime, Brazil's most restrictive custody. 2 hours sunlight daily, no group activities, 1 monthly visit, severe communication limits. He's periodically transferred between facilities, Campo Grande to Mossoró to Catanduvas, preventing stable communication networks or staff corruption. Despite restrictions, intelligence reports indicate attempts to maintain Comando Vermelho influence, though direct control has significantly diminished. In 2 decades since capture, Comando Vermelho has fragmented, with various factions operating semi-independently. Leadership decentralized, multiple bosses control different territories and routes. The organization remains dominant, controlling Rio favela distribution and operating trafficking networks across South America, but faces intense competition from Primeiro Comando da Capital, PCC. In 2016, the CV-PCC alliance collapsed, triggering prison and street violence that reshaped Brazil's criminal landscape. Fernandinho created not just a network dependent on personal leadership, but a system that could survive his absence. His greatest contribution wasn't drugs moved or money made, but the organizational model established. He professionalized the organization, introducing accounting, logistics planning, strategic partnerships, risk management. International relationships outlived his freedom. Supply chains from Colombian sources to Brazilian markets continue operating under different management. Corruption networks, police on payrolls, officials accepting bribes, lawyers providing cover, remain active. This is his true legacy. Not personal empire, but institutional framework transforming a prison gang into a multinational criminal corporation. Even stripped of operational control, Fernandinho retains symbolic importance. He represents organizational history, ambition, resistance against the state. Younger members who never met him know his story. The favela kid who became Brazil's most wanted, who challenged governments and police, who couldn't be broken by decades of imprisonment. Leaders claiming connection to him, visiting him or receiving his blessing, gain organizational credibility. Fernandinho's story reflects systemic issues in Brazil's organized crime approach. Tens of thousands of gang members imprisoned continue directing criminal activities from cells. Prisons become de facto criminal headquarters, places where members concentrate, hierarchies reinforce, recruitment occurs. The question Brazil faces: does imprisonment as currently practiced reduce crime, or simply relocate and concentrate it? Should billions spent on prisons and police be better invested in addressing poverty, inequality, and lack of opportunity driving young people into criminal organizations? Certain criminals transcend humanity and become myths. Their names become symbols outliving actual power. The story becomes more important than the man. Fernandinho Beira-Mar crossed that threshold long ago. In Rio's favelas, his name is spoken with legends like Escadinha, Tim Lopes, Elias Maluco. He's part of the city's dark folklore, stories parents tell children about bad choices, narratives teenagers hear about power when you have nothing else. He didn't just sell drugs, he sold war. He sold the idea that poor kids could challenge state power, build empires, force presidents and generals to speak their names. The cocaine he moved destroyed thousands of lives. The violence he financed killed hundreds, maybe thousands. But he also represented something else to Brazil's slum residents: possibility. Proof the system could be beaten, that someone from the bottom could reach the top. This is the terrible complexity of figures like Fernandinho. They are villains by objective measure, criminals profiting from misery and death. But they're also products of systems that abandoned entire populations, offered no legitimate paths to dignity or prosperity, enforced law selectively, and governed through violence. Today, in favelas where Fernandinho operated, new young men follow the same path. They start with petty crime, graduate to dealing, aspire to become bosses. They know his story, they study his methods, they repeat his mistakes. The drug trade continues, more violent and fragmented. New organizations emerge, new leaders rise and fall. The war between criminals and police claims new victims daily. Children grow up where gunfire is routine, where drug dealers are the most visible authority, where prison or death seem inevitable. Fernandinho didn't create this reality. He was born into it, adapted to it, exploited it with remarkable efficiency. But he also perpetuated it, strengthened it, helped ensure the next generation would face the same terrible choices. How should history judge Fernandinho Beira-Mar? As brilliant criminal entrepreneur? As ruthless killer? As product of systemic inequality? As symbol of everything wrong with Brazil's crime approach? Perhaps all. Perhaps none fully capture the reality of a man who spent decades between extremes: wealth and imprisonment, power and powerlessness, legend and forgotten prisoner. What remains indisputable is his impact. He transformed Comando Vermelho from local gang into international organization. He established supply chains and corruption networks outliving his freedom. He demonstrated that even maximum security prisons couldn't fully contain the most determined criminals. His name still burns like gunpowder in Rio's alleys. Not because he was most violent, richest, or most feared, but because he represented something fundamental about crime, poverty, and power in Brazil. A relationship unchanged as he grows old in his concrete cell. The favelas are still battlefields. Blood is still business. And somewhere in the forgotten streets of Duque de Caxias or Complexo do Alemão, or Cidade de Deus, a young man makes the same calculations Fernandinho made 50 years ago, weighing crime's cost against poverty's cost, choosing the path to power, even at the price of freedom, life, or soul. The cycle continues. The name endures. And in Brazil's maximum security prisons, ghost commanders still whisper orders through concrete walls, proof that in the war between crime and state, neither side wins, and the only certain casualties are innocent people caught in crossfire. He didn't just sell drugs, he sold war, and in Brazil's favelas, his name still burns like gunpowder.